evidence, the burden of proving that concentration, it still remained then with the Commission. And maybe one last comment on this. The question really is then, has this national treatment of efficiencies discouraged really also parties from presenting detailed arguments, especially in fund. And you could say that given the low probability of success and the risk that raising efficiency claims might even signal weak arguments on anti-competitive effects, many parties just may choose to omit them. Yeah, and why investing time and resources to areas which are ultimately considered irrelevant for the final outcome? And enforcers often say or argue that also this criticism, and I mean probably we are all agree on this, is somehow overstated, because in over 97% of all cases, there's no need to elaborate on efficiency. I mean, there are phase 2 cases and risk or cases where there is cases which may be blocked. And in these cases, probably efficiencies are probably, crucial to consider. And probably the argument is that the standard of proof efficiency would be quite high, because those are really the crucial cases.
So let me try to summarize, rather than summarize, to come up with another question that will help summarize your interventions, because I already hear a lot of challenges, problems, concerns, or difficulties to prove efficiency. So in your view, if you could pick the 3 biggest challenges, right, that either from a practical perspective or theoretical perspective, you have seen, you think that may lead to this problem for either regulators or lawyers to take efficiencies more seriously, what are the 3 elements that you will highlight?
First, evidentiary asymmetry, because efficiency are typically held to a significantly higher standard of proof than competitive harm. And it's also what already Vitaly mentioned. Authorities often require near certainty, short-term realization of efficiencies and precise quantification. And then I think the second point would be probably this, somehow an unrealistic, we call it merger specificity standard. Because sometimes, authorities, what they do is frequently invoke hypothetical alternatives, like licensing agreements, joint ventures, collaboration, that might be plausible in theory, but are rarely viable in practice. And it's especially true I would say in capital-intensive, in innovation-driven sectors. The full integration through common ownership of assets is also necessary to resolve coordination failures and ensure long-term alignment. And I think the third point would probably this question of consumer benefit. In merger assessment remain overly focused on short-term price-based indicators of consumer welfare, while often overlook other increasingly important and relevant benefits, like fixed cost savings, capacity rationalization, improved product quality, reliability, and also what is linked to this sustainability performance.
Just let me ask you a quick follow-up question, and Vitaly, I'll give you the floor. The last thing you mentioned about the short-term impact rather than the long-term impact. You may or may not answer if you want, but do you think it's because regulators don't feel comfortable looking at the longer perspective of what things will happen. Because I mean, let's be honest, nobody has a crystal ball to know where things go, and we know that regulators tend to be risk averse. So, do you think is because they feel the longer is the landscape, the less comfortable they feel like with that?
Yeah, although I think this is probably true, but this is not true always with respect to the theory of harm. They sometimes look at the longer circles, at the longer time horizon. So I mean, if you do one thing for theory of harm, and then probably you should also allow this more ample approach also for efficiencies. It is probably also I mean, but you are right. I think there's definitely a problem, but maybe it's also also have to acknowledge it's difficult.
Yeah,
and I mean it's difficult to estimate, and the way how it could be tackled is I mean, if you look at a longer time period, that you combine this with adequate commitments also. I mean, that these, I mean, if people, I mean, if parties say we want to make investment, this could be also linked then to a commitment to do the investment, no, at a certain point in time.
we'll come back later about documents to prove that. For example, Vitaly.
Yeah, I think Konstantin already mentioned quite a few of these issues. So evidentiary burden, definitely one, very high, the bar is very high, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And I agree with all this, but maybe let me just talk about one particular angle that is very close to my heart as an economist, and which I think is really problematic in practice. And what I mean is treatment of efficiencies in non-horizontal mergers.
Okay.
Non-horizontal mergers. So when the parties are actually not rivals, but their activities or capabilities complementary to each other, and usually bringing such parties together under one roof with one control and one decision making allows to unlock massive synergies. It is from an economic perspective, this is very clear. There's a very compelling case for that. Essentially what happens in simple terms is that once you bring the two complementary parties together, the pie gets bigger for the companies themselves and also for consumers. That's very important. There's a very good reason for it. And yet, if you want to talk about efficiency defense in these cases, you're still facing very significant challenges. At the same time, if authorities find that efficiencies may harm competition, and that gives rise very easily to efficiency offense theories, as is common in, let's say, conglomerate mergers.
Mm-hmm.
There's, it's very strange. This asymmetry is very puzzling. Asymmetry in the sense that, reluctance to or skepticism about efficiency claims that are very logical and clearly merger specific. And at the same time, enthusiasm about efficiency defense claims, even if they are somewhat speculative. This is what really puzzles me. Okay,
so now that we know all these problems as well, and perhaps your three main challenges, we know the European Commission is reviewing the merger guidelines, and one potential aspect that is going to be reviewed and perhaps even improved is the merger efficiencies. So what's your view on that? I mean, two questions. First, what the European Commission could do, if you have any idea. And second, perhaps even more interesting, what they should do. What do you think could be improved or will definitely improve this process of the merger efficiencies, or at least to make a successful claim?
Yeah, I mean, I think one important thing also to keep in mind is that the European Commission will not change the merger control regulation. No? This will be a change of soft law, and now it will review the horizontal and non-horizontal merger guidelines. But and this is after from 2004 2004, the horizontal, and from 2008, the non-horizontal guideline. I think this is also a timely update. This framework is outdated, also taking into account the profound market changes, which we all know. I think what the Commission probably should do is, I think there should be efficiency should be moved more to the core also of this competitive effect analysis, and they probably could also the Commission could also probably provide more guidance on also the scenario that Vitaly just mentioned, in these non-horizontal settings, and it would be good somehow if the Commission also commits to applying these symmetric standards of proof and time frames, recognizing fixed costs and dynamic efficiencies, and allow for targeted conservation of these out-of-market benefits, which could also affect a larger group of consumers. And I think in terms of procedure, this would be also good if the Commission also introduces to real opportunities to develop and test efficiency claims. I mean, there could be, for instance, in the pre-notification phase already efficiency meetings, and then the parties should also receive some guidance on what documentation is really needed. And once I think the parties are also capable of substantiating these claims, then this could also then shift the responsibility a bit to the Commission, and then I mean also with its toolbox, it could also carry out a market test, with asking consumers and competitors or checking all these substantiated claims of efficiencies in the market. So this would be I think a good course of action. And in practical terms, I think it would really be good to include somehow case studies and evidence, and description of evidence that the Commission really could use in the future to accept efficiency claims.
I like the idea you mentioned about a market test of the efficiencies, but would you suggest to do it at the same time as remedies or as early as possible, when the parties submit some potential efficiencies to start testing already?
Yeah, it should be. I mean, I think it would be in the interest of the parties to do it before offering remedies commitments. But and this is also one of these key problems nowadays, that quickly the attention turns to commitment. If you see you have a competition problem in a case, the parties do not want to waste probably now resources on claiming efficiency. Probably it's then easier and more, let's say, better also for the outcome that they just focus on commitment. But somehow I think also these two issues are interlinked.
Okay.
Commitments could also have to do later with the efficiency that the parties are claiming.
I think no one has crystal balls. We don't know what exactly is going to happen, right? And probably shouldn't speculate. But what's important to mention is that it's a public consultation, right? So the Commission solicited a lot of feedback. And if you read through these submissions, two things really stand out, in the sense that it's the same type of problems that many different people commented on, and there are two of them. One is the treatment of out-of-market efficiencies, and the second is the changes in evidentiary standards. So I'll say a few words about these two, but the reason I mention them is that if the Commission were to respond or incorporate all the suggestions that it received, then these two would seem like the most obvious candidates, just because it got mentioned so often and apparently resonated with so many people. So just a few words about each of them on out-of-market efficiencies. It is, mergers in principle affect many different markets, right? So efficiencies also may impact many different markets. There is nothing wrong with taking a sort of holistic perspective here and assessing everything in the round. And this is particularly important in markets where you see demand interdependencies or externalities. And digital markets are, for instance, a case in point. In the digital sector, some products may actually have zero prices, right? So you cannot really talk about cost reductions in the traditional sense. Maybe it's more about, more resources spent on innovation or R&D, and that means the creation of entirely new products or services. So something which doesn't, did not even exist at the time of the merger. So clearly, it would be wrong to ignore these. But it is not just about digital. Sort of in more traditional sectors, you can also see these outcomes. Just to give a very stylized example, imagine a merger of two car manufacturers. Maybe as a result of that merger, they gain market power and the price of car goes up, and of course that would be bad. But consumers don't just buy a car and that's it. Consumers also need to take a car to a service station. We have to do regular maintenance. So if that merger creates some efficiencies in the form of, network of service stations or better servicing, then in principle that is also efficiency that accrues to exactly the same consumers who have purchased the car, only in a different setting, and it would be wrong to completely ignore these efficiencies. So that's an out-of-market question. And when it comes to evidentiary standards, what Konstantin mentioned already before, clearly the parties face much higher burden of proof. And interestingly, the Commission, if they want to prove a theory of harm, sometimes they resort to qualitative arguments. They very rarely do quantification of a theory of harm or any harm, actually. There are very few cases where the Commission will do, let's say, a merger simulation model and say, well, we predict that, merger would raise prices by X%. That almost never happens. Yet, when parties, bring up the question of efficiencies, the question is always, by how much the cost will go down, or by how much that would exactly compensate price increases. So clearly, there's a mismatch. And that is important not just for the Commission, by the way. It is also important for many national authorities, because they look for guidance on these questions to the Commission, and they understand that these are very difficult questions, basically, and they would like the Commission to set an example. So if the Commission were to listen to all this feedback, I would hope that they would say something in these two areas.
So actually, let's continue with the evidentiary proof. By the way, I saw we have a question that actually might be related. So if anybody has questions, please drop them in the chat, and we'll try to answer. So Ismail was commenting or asking that the authority distrusts the parties since they think that they will never offer efficiencies that may go against the transaction. And I want to link that to the evidentiary proof, right? You go to the regulator, you claim efficiencies, you have to prove them, you have to calculate, and also you have to face the, perhaps following Ismail's comment, an initial rejection from the regulator, like, okay, whatever you're going to bring me is your view because you want to pass this. So coming back to the proof, how you prove that, what documents you need. I know that people in the audience are actually listening this closely, because at the end, that's really the key, right? How you prove it, what documents, perhaps even what do you need from companies? Because it's very easy to come up and say, hey, we're going to reduce prices because management said so. Yeah, now prove it. So both of you have been there. What's your view? What's the what you have to face when you are in the regulator and you have to prove that?
Yeah, I mean, it's true that authorities want more than just promises, and I think the key idea is also to somehow to submit an auditable plan to assess and track a delivery, of these efficiencies. And I think, you already mentioned internal documentation is key. I mean, if the Commission uses internal documentation, we always face this, also to prove its theory of harm, then they should also, this internal documentation should also be given the same weight when it comes to prove efficiencies. And then, I mean, white papers, strategy desk, investment memos that link the merger, the transaction to the claimed efficiency should be equally valid. I mean, the same, so have the same importance and for the theory of harm. And I would also say, I mean, any study from a specific study from an economist. Sometimes, I mean, the Commission looks at these studies a bit, with suspicion, because it thinks this is biased. But I mean, companies should be in a position, I mean, to provide these studies. I mean, there's no need to write up a report if it before a merger like this. But if you before the Commission, then it's perfectly fine. I mean, to put this task before economists, and then they come up with a report. I mean, to measure these efficiencies. And then I think also what key is also external validation, sector reports, benchmarking studies, econometric models to support all these key assumptions, KPIs, with metrics for rollout, cost reduction, and service quality, and so on. This could be an avenue. Yeah.
Well, let me just maybe broaden this question a little bit and say talk about what one would need to do to have a plausible efficiency defense, right? And I think with all the skepticism that we've discussed, maybe some people would say, well, there's nothing much you can do, right? It's basically hopeless. I would be slightly more optimistic about it. I think there are still quite a few things that companies and their advisors can do. And let me just name a few. So first of all, we would have to tick all these three boxes on merger specificity, benefits to consumers, and verifiability. I think this framework conceptually makes a lot of sense, and probably is not going to change. So in the new guidelines, all the three conditions will be there. So you have to tick all the three boxes, but you have to tell a very clear story as a company or as an advisor. What I mean by this, sometimes there are things which look like efficiency, but actually it is not, or it is not the right type of efficiency. So you have to be careful about this. An example, let's say you have merging parties, each has a production line, but each production line is only 50% utilized. So there's all the spare capacity. So somebody can make a claim, well, a merger actually allows you to produce the whole, the same output, but by using only one production line, so you get rid of the other one. And in principle, that's efficiency. Yes, but this is not about benefits to consumers. This is benefit to the company. In fact, consumers may be harmed because extra capacity or free capacity on the market is a sign that the firms compete a lot, and that usually is going to stimulate competition. Once you reduce your capacity, that actually it means that the market will likely be less competitive. So you have to be clear about this. You have to tell a clear story which sort of fits the facts, and this is about the right type of efficiency. That's number one. Number two, just take a broader perspective. You have to focus on cost reductions. Fair. Okay, that could be a starting point, but there are many other things. What about complementary capabilities of the merging firms? There could be a loss of complementarities. Maybe it's R&D, maybe some technical expertise, maybe it's distribution or logistics. But lots of things you could think about. Think about them creatively. Try to come up with a story which shows that these complementarities are going to create new products or services or improve existing products or services. And that's very important, especially in the digital context. Third, I would say sometimes you can actually address this question to other authorities. So in the recent case, which I've worked, our client had to liaise not only with the competition authority, but with other government bodies or a few ministries. And in principle, you can talk about efficiencies there. And it's not exactly the same type of efficiency as would be considered by competition authorities. So you may talk about broader social and economic goals, like, impact on employment, impact on investment. This is not exactly what the European Commission would accept, let's say. But these authorities are also important element in this in the setting, and these authorities talk to each other. So use these arguments, maybe use them elsewhere, but play this card very wisely. And the last thing, which really is the most important one, is you have to do your homework. You cannot start talking about efficiencies at the end of phase 2. This is not credible, right? So you need to pay more attention to this pre-merger. And lots of things one can do. You can do a self-assessment. You can look carefully at the mechanisms through which efficiencies may benefit consumers. Try to quantify this as much as possible, and importantly, keep the record of all of this work. It's got to be in internal documents. There are lots of tools, analytical tools like consumer surveys or pass-on studies, or maybe management discussions or presentations. I mean, you can have useful material in all these places, but you have to keep that. You have to keep the record of this. You should not end up in a situation like booking eTraveli, which is currently on appeal, where the parties, and that was, by the way, non-horizontal case, so where efficiencies probably make a bit more sense. And the parties, of course, made this argument. And the Commission basically said, well, we do not see any evidence in internal documents on how you would pass on these efficiencies to final consumers. And it's a shame, because you should try not to be in this situation. You should keep the record of all these internal documents, and if the Commission starts asking you questions, then you will have something to present.
Yeah, and I totally agree. And I think one of the key issues is also to identify these cases. And I mean, the Commission since I think 1990 has reviewed about 10,000 cases, and there have been I think 39 prohibitions. And probably this is where really where you could ask, I mean, as in this booking case, whether efficiencies could have saved this case. But I mean, put this into a perspective. 39 cases out of 10,000. So I mean, there's work for clients, but I mean, also each case is different, and probably only a few ones really need this attention in terms of efficiency.
So let me, because we are approaching to the end of the webinar, let me play the devil's advocate here. I know we don't like to try hypotheticals, but listening to you about when to bring the efficiencies and the benefits and so on. So I would like to think about the other objectives that the Commission is trying to achieve, right? Whether it's environmental things, or even, it's not a secret as well, EU champions, protection of the industry, industrial policy in general. So what about, two companies merging, whether it's horizontal or not horizontal, close to a monopoly, and they say, hey, but don't worry, because we are becoming greener. I mean, we are reducing pollution, the consumers will benefit, whether it is monetary or not, yet to be decided, right? But a strong case to say, we are not going to use fossil fuels anymore, we are becoming electric. I don't know, pick an industry. And that's super good for consumers, but not for competition in general. Would that be enough? Or even we have another one with satellites where, the biggest players are trying to merge. And obviously there is a strong case from industrial policy. Is that something that the Commission will be willing to play along?
This is a fascinating question.
It's a hypothetical.
I don't know. I think in principle, one has to make a distinction between competition policy and politics or broader policy questions.
Yeah, but
no, I think maybe, we're really speculating here, but maybe there will be cases where the Commission say, well, for certain reasons, we approve it because we think it serves a broader policy purpose, even though as far as competition is concerned, things are not clear cut, possibly. I don't know. I would only say that a lot of these discussions, that all of the scenarios, Aitor, that you just mentioned, they originate or were raised in the Draghi report, right?
Yes.
And then this is I think the fundamental, this the seminal piece of work which sort of prompted all this debate, or contributed to a large extent. And I think this is right, but also in Draghi report, there is a sentence which very clearly says it should not, we should not go for efficiencies if it, we should not just justify the increase in concentration by already dominant firms just on the basis of efficiencies. So I think even in that report, there is very clear sort of reluctance to go to, let's say, merger to monopoly. That's difficult to swallow.
Yeah, I mean, two comments on this. Probably also there's, I mean, the first issue already probably could also be, I mean, market definition. I mean, if you, for instance, include also, I mean, talking about these segments, market segments, if you just look at the greener products, it could be a very narrow segment, but if probably you also need to include then other operators that offer or provide the less greener product into the market definition. So what looks like a monopoly maybe is not monopoly if you also somehow take into account these things when already defining the market. And after all, I think, I totally agree with Vitaly. Probably, I mean, merger control policy is, I think, also said by one of the commissioners. It's an enabler. No, it cannot be. It's not. You cannot overload now merger competition policy with this broader public policy objectives. I mean, it's about competition, and then let's see to what extent we could include externalities, in this merger control analysis. But it's really a tough one.
Yeah, I think now, by the way, I will give the floor to the audience if you want to ask questions again, either orally or just drop your question in the chat. Having conversations with different lawyers and economists one-to-one, this issue that you mentioned, Konstantin, is present everywhere. Like how many things we need to take into consideration right now in merger, and not only merger control, but perhaps merger control is one of the most obvious ones. But there are more and more objectives, more things to take into account, and it seems to be farther and farther from where we were a few years ago. So I'm going to give you also, Vitaly and Konstantin, the floor for the last minute if you want to sum up or just launch this last idea that the audience should consider before we close on merger efficiencies, how this either will evolve or to consider in their cases.
Well, I would maybe just a short remark about something that Konstantin mentioned at the very beginning, that there is the perceived risk that talking about efficiencies would signal that merging parties don't believe in other arguments. The last resort. And I personally find this position very illogical. I think every argument should be judged on its own merits. So if you've got a good case about efficiencies, you should be talking about it, and that should be considered at its face value, not as a sort of some weird strategic interpretation which may jeopardize your chances of approval. But sadly, it is what it is, and I would really love this attitude to change. But I think it starts with companies, because it starts with companies or their advisors who should be more active in that area if you want to change this paradigm.
Yeah, I also want to see more of this, a bit more willingness also to accept these claims. I mean, nowadays, I mean, if you look now at these merger control decisions, I mean, if there's a provision or even phase 2 with commitments decision, efficiency are hardly dealt with. I mean, there are just 2 or 3 pages in a decision that has hundreds of pages. in saying that this was not quantifiable, this was not substantiated. And after all, for instance, now in this Sabadell merger, they just say that the problems had arisen in the local context, and that is all these efficiencies applied on a national scale. I mean, this is something you can try to nail down during the procedure with the parties, to make this how this could be implemented in practice. And I think there should be a bit more willingness also on the part of the regulator to listen to the parties, in good faith.
So we hope that happens at the national level and the EU level. By the way, you chose an example that was everything but controversial from a political point of view too. But yeah, anyway, Konstantin, Vitaly, thank you very much for your time, for your ideas and expertise. Thank you for sharing with us. To all of you, thank you as well for attending today. I will share this recording with you later at some point this week. So I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and probably we'll organize more webinars in the future. So if you have any topic you want to discuss, please let me know, and we'll bring the right experts for that. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.